Our topic for today is the Enlightenment. This is the period, last period in modern philosophy. We have already discussed about the Renaissance. So this is now a continuation of the Renaissance. So the philosophy of Enlightenment, as we have said, is a culmination, I would say, the culmination of the modern philosophy, especially um, in their attempt to really put reason or to glorify reason over faith, over what they consider to be superstitious and dogmatic thinking. The Enlightenment thinkers were very optimistic. They're very optimistic about the, the promise of reason. The period of Enlightenment is a big intellectual movement, the beginning of which can be traced at the close of the Glorious Revolution in England. In England in 1688, this revolution against the monarchy. And from that Glorious Revolution in England in 1688, it lasted until the French Revolution in 18 or 1789. So that's a 100 years of movement. And as historical period, Enlightenment refers to a series of changes in European thought and letters. And the term Enlightenment actually was coined by the people who lived through this era, this century, as a kind of description of the new culture that emerged during their period, Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment of what? It's the Enlightenment of reason. So if we're going to trace back the history of modern philosophy, it started with the Renaissance, and they consider the Renaissance to be the rebirth practically of reason, the rebirth of thought. Of course, the rebirth, a renewal based on reason, because they thought the classical period was the first birthing of reason. And this rebirth of reason manifested in the advancement in science, the advancement in humanities, the advancement in political thought. Okay? And it gradually evolved, not just a kind of a rebirth of reason. It actually it developed into a full development, a full manifestation of reason. And that's the time when they said, now we are now in the era of enlightenment. Okay? So the term enlightenment was coined by those people who lived through that era as a kind of that, as a description of that attitude, of that culture. So this new culture developed under the guidance of reason, positioned itself in radical contrast to the past ages, especially during the Middle Ages. We know if we go back to the Middle Ages, reason was subsumed to faith. It was more of theology over science and over philosophy. If there was a science that we can call, meaning the natural or the physical science that emerged and developed during the Renaissance and that continued until the Enlightenment. So it's a different kind of culture already, because if the scholastics during the Middle Ages relied much on faith, on revelation, things that according to the modern thinkers are bordering to superstition, now you have the logos. Now you have the promise of reason. So they say. Okay? So according to the Illuminati, meaning the exponents of the Enlightenment period, the Middle Ages is the product of philosophical and religious prejudices of the time that failed to use the light of reason. They failed to use the light of reason. And because of this failure to use the light of reason, they regard the Middle Ages as a kind of dark age, the dark ages, not only because of the wars, the many wars during the Middle Ages, but because they preferred more the use of faith rather than the light of reason. Okay, so the thinkers of the Enlightenment refers to this age as dark age or the age of obscurantism. Now, this new culture, their culture, the Enlightenment culture, with its new brand of philosophy, intends to introduce an age of enlightenment through the use of reason, in order to dispel this age of darkness or this age of obscurantism, this age of dogmatism. So, the writers and the thinkers of this period, of the Enlightenment period, refer to their age as enlightenment. And for that, and for them, it means that they're breaking from the past which is characterized by obscurity, by darkness, by prejudices, by ignorance, and they are replacing this. They're breaking from that tradition, and they are replacing it with the light and guidance of reason. That is why they proclaim that this is now the age of enlightenment. So, no less than Immanuel Kant proclaimed that this is the age of enlightenment. And he described what this enlightenment is. It is actually, the full flowering, the blossoming of reason. So the Enlightenment, the 18th century writers claim that during the age of enlightenment, reason made good its promise. It showed the way to progress in science, in philosophy, and religion. And religion is no longer a religion that is based on uh, revelation or the scriptures, but it's a kind of natural religion based on, natural reason, politics, and the arts. The pure and brilliant light of reason, for them, was able to overcome the darkness caused by the prejudice, by the authority, by the dogma under which man or humanity had previously labored and lived during the Middle Ages. So it's a big contrast between the scholastic period of the Middle Ages and the Enlightenment period of the modern age. Okay, so it's a big contrast between these two periods, or let's say cultures, in the history of philosophy. So it could be noted that the opposition to the immediate past had manifested itself to a limited degree during the Renaissance. Okay, so during the Renaissance, of course, the Renaissance thinkers like Descartes, okay, and even Hobbes, they were still under the influence of the scholastics, because you know they immediately followed right after the scholastic era, and they were schooled under scholasticism. Okay, so they are still connected to that era, but the Enlightenment thinkers were already far removed from that era. Okay, so if you look at the humanism during the Renaissance, well, it had minimized and ignored the Middle Ages, and had accentuated and lauded the classical world of ancient Greece and Rome. But even if they do this, they're still connected to this past, to the immediate past. Okay, but of course they were already breaking from this tradition. And of course, during the Renaissance, now you have the emergence of Protestantism that extolled primitive Christianity. However, the Enlightenment philosophers, for their part, considered the entire past to be work of non-reason at all. So it was a total break from the past. Okay, it's not reason at all. And they attempted to go further still than the Renaissance to excel the past in its various manifestations of culture, religion, and government. So, with all science of the past discredited, now man was brought back at last to his origins, to his natural state, to his natural capacity. There's no more need to you know refer to a kind of religion that, or a kind of philosophy that always points up, meaning points to God for explanation of reality. So if during the scholastic era they always have kind of a fallback, God, to explain reality, now of course they have to rely on revelation and scriptures in order to explain reality, explain life, human life. Now the Enlightenment thinkers, they only have to rely on man's natural capacity, reason, human reason alone. So the Enlightenment then worked to formulate a new philosophical system, a rational system which evolved through reason and purified all prejudices, all dogma, all kinds of ecclesiastical authority, so to speak. It is a system which embraces all legal, civil, juridical, and religious human activities. So of course, there is religion, but this kind of religion is a natural religion, a religion that is expressed, a religion that is developed, understood within reason, within the power of reason. Okay? So when you talk of enlightenment, it is always the release of human reason from all these kinds of, all these kinds of authority. So authority from the church, even the authority of the monarchy. If you remember, if we go back to the French Revolution, they actually did away with, they put away the monarchy. Okay? So that's the spirit of the Enlightenment. Now, let's talk more about the value of reason. How the Enlightenment thinkers understood reason or interpreted reason. Reason, as interpreted by the Enlightenment thinkers, is the faculty which Descartes described as the good sense. The good sense. And it is equally distributed and common to all men, meaning everybody has this good sense. All human beings have this reason, capable of thought. Okay, so the Enlightenment thinkers recognize not just human reason, but also the rational order in the universe. Okay? Of course, it's not something that the Enlightenment thinkers were first to to believe in, because if we go back to the Greeks already you know stressed or affirmed that there is a rational order in the universe. Okay, there's a logos, so to speak. There's a logos. It's not just that human reason has a logos or a logical order. There is also a logos outside of the mind. There's a logical order in the universe, in the external objective reality. Right? So this rational order is manifested in the association of one phenomenon with another. Okay? Meaning, if you understand this rational order that prevails in the universe, then we can understand how one particular phenomenon is connected to other phenomena. Okay? However, This rational order is not due to reason of finality or causality, but simply by virtue of mechanical necessity, meaning it has its own order. It has its own mechanical necessity. There is a mechanical force. There's a law within this order, not because there is a kind of an external cause, a God, for example, that provides or is the cause of this rational order in the universe. Okay, so as witnesses to the establishment of modern physics, because we refer back to Galileo and Newton, they consider science of nature and physics as regulated by mechanical necessity. So nature is regulated by mechanical necessity. And if we affirm that nature, the physical universe, is regulated by mechanical necessity, then there's no need to affirm an external being who is the cause of this rational order in the universe. So the Enlightenment thinkers, okay, following the following the advancement of science, attempted to apply the same laws and methods of mechanical necessity to every field of human knowledge. Okay? So they have abandoned and rejected all forms of authority and finalism, meaning authority, finalism that is coming from the outside, and proclaim mechanism or mechanical necessity as a single rational means of solving the problems of nature and society. So, therefore, there inevitably emerges a kind of natural light, a natural society, a natural religion. Natural light, natural society, natural religion. And from this natural state, a succession of associated phenomena started to unfold by mechanical necessity. Okay, so that's how they explain the connection, the relationship of different phenomena. Everything consists in a succession of phenomena starting from the so-called state of nature and proceeding one from another by mechanical necessity. So if it is a mechanical necessity by determination, okay, so everything becomes like a well-coordinated machine. So all these suppositions of naturalism would later find their violent manifestations in the great upheaval of the French Revolution. Okay. So again, that's the how they consider reality. Okay, there is a rational order in reality, and this rational order in reality is due to mechanical necessity. There is an internal dynamism, so to speak, within nature, within physical reality. Okay, so now let's go to the four pillars of Enlightenment thought, and these are nature, reason, experience, and progress. Okay, so first let's talk about nature. Nature was viewed as orderly. Okay, there's a rational order, governed by laws, and basically benevolent. Okay, so it's not chaotic. Nature is not chaotic. There is kind of order. Everything is governed by laws. Okay, so nature in general. Now, of course, we also find human nature. And human nature was likewise seen as orderly, governed by laws, and basically benevolent. Once we remove the distractions of passion, dogma, and allow reason to prevail. Okay? So what uh, what brings chaos in this order would be the passion, the emotions. So it's important that we try to control these irrational passions of man through reason. We have to allow reason to prevail over passions. And not only about the irrational passions, we also have to let reason prevail over dogmatism. Okay? So reason was thought to be the great equalizer among people. Because reason, as the good sense, is common to everybody. So whether understood as a source of a priori knowledge, and that's the position of the rationalist, or as an instrument to organize experience, and that's the position of the empiricist, reason is common to all. Okay? It's the good sense that is common to all. So reason is not only it's not only for the privileged, for the elite. Okay? Now, by learning through experience and with the basic capacity to be reasonable and with the help of education, man's rational powers will be increased and it will be enhanced. So reason is common to all, but it must be enhanced. These rational powers must be enhanced. There is basic capacity, but we need to enhance this basic capacity. And the way to enhance this basic capacity is through reason, or rather through education. That's why they make a great deal of education. Rousseau wrote a beautiful book about the education of a young boy, Emile. Hence, every problem, whether theoretical or social, can be solved through science and concerted and rational effort. Okay. And all this will lead to progress. So reason, nature, reason, uh, nature, reason, education, progress. Okay? So with all these conditions, according to Kant, people will be able to work freely and reduce gradually the hindrances preventing the general enlightenment and an escape from self-caused immaturity. So that's Kant describing what enlightenment is. Okay, so if we enhance our reason through education, then the great promise of reason will materialize. Now, of course, when you look at enlightenment, the enlightenment thinkers, just like the scholastics or scholasticism, as a philosophical movement, does not have any single school of thought. And there's no established canon or systematic program. Okay? But it produced philosophers whose influence on technical philosophy has been immeasurable. It was not only, it was not mainly concerned with theoretical issues, but they were also concerned with practical ones. In the interest which its leaders had in philosophy was not just technical, but it was also political and humanitarian. Okay? So the prevailing tone of the Enlightenment was literary, and its mode is relaxed and non-academic. Because if you're going to compare their tone to the previous philosophers. Okay? But of course, you have to draw some uh, exceptions to this because, well, if you read Kant and Hegel, there are you don't consider them to be relaxed or non-academic because they are. Okay? But majority of the succeeding, the other Enlightenment thinkers, like for example Voltaire and Rousseau, okay, they were the tone of the writings were more literary and non-academic. So its style is attuned to the salon rather than to the classroom or the library. But of course, its identifiable pattern, its common objective and assumption, its thought had a decisive effect on subsequent history of philosophy, of modern European philosophy, that is. So, Enlightenment represented a collective and cooperative effort to reappraise the European life without sectarian prejudice. So the thinkers of the time were convinced that scientific knowledge is the only effective instrument for achieving human happiness and progress. So the Enlightenment thinkers were interested in freeing no, the minds of men from the fantastic mythologies and fanaticism, from the dogmatism, from the prejudices that prevailed during the past ages and which prevented men from being either intelligent or happy. As if to say that people during the Middle Ages, the past, were never happy because they were never able to use their natural capacities. So therefore, for the Enlightenment thinkers, philosophy is understood not just as an instrument for intelligence, but more importantly, is an instrument for human happiness, for human flourishing. So man, for them, struggles against ignorance and tyranny, and the struggle against ignorance is linked to the struggle against tyranny. If people are ignorant, they're easily ruled by tyrants. If they're not informed, they're easy to be abused. So philosophy appeals to the common sense of mankind, to reason, and seeks universal solution to particular problems, believing that the good of mankind takes precedence over the interests of any nation or sect or any church. Okay? So the knowledge of the moral good is easily attainable if the mind is free from inherited prejudices, okay, from fantasies, from dogmas, from myth, from fiction. So we need to free the mind from all this so that we can attain knowledge of the good and then attain happiness. So that's the promise of the Enlightenment. That's what they consider to be the promise of reason. Now let's go to the main components of the Enlightenment thought. As I've said, there's no single movement, there's no single doctrine, there's no single, kind of canon. But of course, there are fundamental beliefs, there are fundamental positions that characterize the Enlightenment period. Because some of this we have already mentioned. So just to put them, to put them together, the first one is that the universe is fundamentally rational. There's a rational order in reality. And the universe follows mechanical laws, and that it can be understood through the use of reason. So there is reason both in the physical order, and there's also reason in the mind. Because that idea is an idea that they shared with the Renaissance thinkers. Okay? The second is that truth can be arrived at through empirical observation, the use of reason, and systematic doubt. Now you see here how they put together rationalism and empiricism and skepticism. So we arrive at truth through empirical observation. That's the position of the empiricist. Through the use of reason, that's the position of the rationalist. And through systematic doubt, that's the position of the skeptics. So what a way to put together all this. Okay. Number 3, that human experience is the foundation of human understanding and truth. Human experience. And that authority should not be preferred over experience. Okay. So, authority, ecclesiastical authority, political authority, or many other authorities that hinder the progress of reason. So if you want to understand something, we have to rely on our experience. And number 4, all human life, both social and individual, can be understood in the same way the natural world can be understood. Because if there is a rational order in the natural world, there is also an order in human nature. And once understood, human life can be manipulated, meaning it can be re-engineered in the same way the natural world can be manipulated and engineered. Okay? And number 5, that human history is the history of progress. But we are advancing. Okay? We are advancing. And of course, one of the Enlightenment philosophers who explained this history of progress through the dialectics is Hegel. Okay? So there is a progression. We are moving progressively into a higher forms. Number 6, that human beings can improve through education and through the development of rational faculties. So it's not just a progress in history. There is human progress. There is human improvement. And human progress can be brought about by education, by developing the rational capacities or the rational faculties of man. So man has a rational capacity. Everybody has this good sense. But in order for this good sense to be developed, to be improved, to be enhanced, we need education. And lastly, religious doctrines have no place in the understanding of the physical and human world. Because these religious doctrines for them are all based on prejudices. These are dogmas, okay, that cannot be traced back to human experience. So if we want to understand the physical and the human world, we have to rely on experience and on reason, not on religious dogmas or religious prejudices, which are found in the doctrines of religion. Now, it's not to say that they are against religion, because they believe in religion, only that this religion is understood through natural reason. That's why they call it natural religion. All right, now let's go now to how this Enlightenment thought developed. What's the foundation? What's the basis of this Enlightenment thought? Okay, so let's discuss the foundation of the development of this Enlightenment thought. And the development of this thought of enlightenment can be traced to these events, historical events. Okay, the first is the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution started way back the Renaissance. Okay? Of course, it's not just actually during the time of Renaissance, because there were already other thinkers, even during the time of the medievals, have already undermined, have already questioned some of the religious doctrines of the time. Okay? So, these scientific, of course, I'm talking of, let's say, Nicholas of Cusa. Okay, and of course, we know about Copernicus, and then of course Galileo. Okay, so they initiated this scientific revolution, and this resulted in the new systems of understanding the physical world. Okay, so under the scientific revolution, we see the development of the empirical thought. So it advanced the notion that human observation is a reliable indicator of the nature of phenomena. And we can trace this back to the works of Francis Bacon, his Novum Organum, his inductive method. So repeated human observation can produce reasonable expectations about future natural events. Then, of course, under the scientific revolution, we also see the mechanistic view of the world. The universe is viewed as a machine, governed by mechanical laws. So the universe functions by natural, predictable laws. Everything is determined by these laws. So though God created the world, of course, okay, so God may have created the world, but He does not interfere in its activities. Because once the world or the universe is understood as a machine, it can be manipulated for the benefit of humanity. So actually, that's the basis for how we, how we modify, how we study physical reality, for the benefit of humanity. So Bacon was talking about man being the master of nature. And for man to be the master of nature, he must be able to study the laws of nature. Man has dominion over nature. So man has to study the natural laws in order to manipulate this reality for the benefit of man. Okay? Now, number two, the application of scientific thinking to what were normally interpretative science and the redeployment of human sciences. So the scientific thinking is not just about the physical, the physical reality or the natural reality. They applied scientific thinking to the human sciences. So the ideas and models generated through scientific thinking were exported. They were applied to the human sciences. And the theories of personality, human development, move away from the religious and moral explanations of human behavior. If before, they have to rely on the religious and moral explanations of human behavior, now these theories of personality, of human development, were based on a kind of scientific thinking. Okay? So even in psychology, like for example, the experiment of um, what's this uh, Wilhelm Wundt and company, Wundt, the structuralists, and the functionalists like William James. Okay, started to explain human development, human personality through scientific models, through the paradigm of science, no longer based on some religious, you know, religious orientations. So next, human behavior and interactions were explained in terms of empirical analysis and mechanical explanations. Yes, I was talking about the psychologists of the time. And epistemologies were patterned after the scientific thinking. So you see the emergence of different epistemologies that were based on science, the natural, the natural science. And politics were, political matters were explained in terms of the model of nature. So you see, the scientific thinking prevailed over many aspects of human life and human endeavor. And the scientific thinking is a manifestation of reason being at work. Okay? All right, now who started all this? Who started this scientific thinking that became the basis of the Enlightenment thought? Well, we can trace it back to Newton. Okay? Newton's physics and scientific thinking, its influence on the Enlightenment thought. But let's not forget that before Newton, there were other thinkers who preceded Newton. I've listed here Nicholas Copernicus, okay, who in his book, The Revolution of Heavenly Bodies, okay, stressed and affirmed that, well, the Earth is not the center of the universe, but it's the sun that is the center of this system, and it's actually the Earth moving and all the other things in this solar system moving around the sun. So he initiated this Copernican revolution in human thought. But as I have mentioned, even before Nicholas Copernicus was already Nicholas of Cusa, another prelate, who advocated some kind of a scientific pantheistic view about the universe. Then, of course, Galileo Galilei, who discovered the law of motion of falling bodies, gravity. And of course, John Kepler, who discovered the law of planetary motions. So, after these three figures, Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler, comes Newton. First, we have already mentioned Newton in our discussion of Leibniz. Okay? But let's just focus on Newton, and his contribution to the scientific thinking, which became the basis of the Enlightenment thought. Newton was born in 1642, the same year that Galileo died. And Newton acknowledged his debt to his predecessors, to his, these giants, which he considered to be the giants. He said, if I have seen further than, of course, the other scientists, the other thinkers, it is because I have stood upon the shoulders of giants. The giants that he referred to were his predecessors, Galileo, Kepler, Copernicus, and the many other uh, scientists who were ahead of him, who preceded him. So the work of Galileo is a case of fertile intellectual soil accumulating for centuries while being cultivated and seeded by previous thinkers until it was finally harvested by a great intellect in the person of Newton. So Newton had the benefit of the advancement of all the other thinkers, of all the other scientists who were ahead of him. And he acknowledged that. He acknowledged his debt to these scientists. So Newton's achievement in physics consisted in developing a single comprehensive theory from which he could integrate Galileo's laws that describes the motion of falling bodies, meaning the gravity, and Kepler's laws of the planetary motions. So scientists of the past have been working on what we can consider to be parts of a jigsaw puzzle, that each piecing together different parts, hoping that one day they would be able to put them all together into one picture. So they're working on different pieces, but they failed to put all these pieces together. And it was Newton was able to put all these pieces together, okay, and develop a single comprehensive theory about the universe. Okay. So Newton showed that the contributions of the other scientists that were before him could be integrated into a single, coherent, and beautiful picture of nature. So he showed that the phenomena in the sky, as well as on the ground, could be explained by the same fundamental laws. So you have reason in the outside and reason in the inside. His achievement was so marvelous that it provided the framework for science for over 200 years until, of course, Albert Einstein came, who provided a new model of the cosmos in the 20th century. But of course, we are in debt to Newton. And it seems like everybody in philosophy, they also wanted to be like Newton. So if science had Newton, they want to be the Newton in philosophy. Newton influenced a lot of thinkers. He influenced Kant, no? He influenced Hegel. Of course, before uh, before Hegel developed many of his great ideas, he was actually uh, a fan of Newton, and of course Kant. Before his great philosophical works, he was also influenced by Newton. So everybody wants to be like Newton in philosophy. So Newton showed that there are no special sacred spaces in the physical realm, and that the heavens and the earth are made of the same materials and follow the same laws. Meaning by heaven is the universe. So the universe became increasingly less mysterious and more open to human understanding. It became open to prediction and even control. So if the universe was a great clock, Newton had given mathematical substance to to this image. And when Newton published his Principia Mathematica, it became clear that mathematical and experimental science was the new king of all intellectual fields. That's why you can see from our discussion that the philosophers, they all followed the mathematical model. So all philosophy and religion would come to terms with it in some way or another. Now, Newton wanted science to do away with speculative metaphysics and stick to the unadulterated data of experience, of observation. Science should describe the observable behavior of bodies and enable us to calculate future observations. So therefore, science should give up any attempt to deal with essences and underlying reality of things, and science should only describe the patterns of phenomena. And the reality that lies behind or beneath and beyond these phenomena cannot be scientifically comprehended. So those that are beneath, behind, beyond the phenomena are what would Kant call, of course, the nomina, the things in themselves. So to the Enlightenment, Newton was more than a great physicist. He was actually a cultural hero. Both the rationalists and the empiricists claim him to be their own. In the great synthesizing mind of Newton recognized the importance of both the deductive, the mathematical approach favored by the scientists and the philosophers like Galileo and Descartes, and the inductive and empirical or experimental approach favored by the empiricists like Bacon and Boyle. So the philosophers of the time thought that just as Newton had resolved all mysteries concerning physical bodies, it was time to apply the same methods of experimental observation to the mysteries concerning human existence. So they thought that the operations of the mind, ethics, and politics were a collection of phenomena that would or that could be explained in terms of descriptive mechanical laws. And therefore, the philosophers of the Enlightenment, they all aspired to be the Newton of the human sciences. As I've said, everybody wants to be like Newton. Of course, it remains a question whether everything has been discovered by Newton or discovered by the scientists and by the philosophers. Because there is so much in reality that we still don't know. Because, well, no matter how science discovers a lot of things about the universe, there will always be something mysterious that will remain. And therefore, we still have to acknowledge the existence of the God who created this universe, which science only tried to discover. The science did not create. Science discovers. It does not create. So, the model of Newtonian physics would be the model of epistemology of this era, of the Enlightenment era. And corresponding to the physical particles whose laws of motion Newton unveiled, ideas were thought to be mental particles that could be analyzed down to its fundamental atomic, most basic units. And therefore, all ideas, if they had any meaning at all, were considered complexes, which are made up of simple ideas derived from experience. So this model of this epistemology would, would go on. It will even influence the logical positivists about uh, the elementary propositions, the terms, the most, most the basic element of thought. So corresponding to the outer space of the astronomer was the inner space of the mind. It's like a container within which ideas floated and are connected together according to psychological laws. So there are natural laws corresponding to, to the elements in the of the space. There were also psychological laws that govern the connection and the relation of ideas inside the mind. Okay, now let's talk about one particular, enlightenment, which happened, of course, in one of these countries in France, the French Enlightenment. There's something that what do you call this? That embodied this kind of thinking, this enlightenment thought. Well, you can see that not only among the Germans, but you can also see that even among the in French thought. So uh, so let's talk about French Enlightenment. In French Enlightenment, found such a favorable reception in France. Enlightenment found such a favorable reception that it was able to develop its own ultimate consequences. And the fundamental characteristics of French Enlightenment are these. First, the abhorrence of any positive religion, in particular of Catholicism. Okay. Number two, a tendency to endorse British empiricism, which replaced Cartesian rationalism. In this case, British empiricism could better justify the negation of the existence of God and the mechanistic conception of the universe. And therefore, many of the French Enlightenment thinkers were either atheists or deists, because they cannot follow Cartesian rationalism, because Descartes uh, affirmed, stressed the existence of God. Descartes was still appealing to theology. We know that when he wrote his meditations, he dedicated the meditations of first philosophy to the faculty of theology of Sorbonne. Next, the theory of the equality of all men in the state of nature. He advocated this, the theory of equality of men in the state of nature, and therefore the necessity of the organization of a new society in accordance with the rights of man in his natural state. Okay, so the symbol of unity and vitality of the Enlightenment was the publication of the French Encyclopedia, and it became the instrument for expressing these new ideas and spreading them throughout Europe. The Encyclopedia was the work of many years, and it actually required the collaboration of many cultured men. The authors were of varied opinion, but they were united by a single purpose, and that is to give a new political and religious doctrine to France in the name of reason. Because it was not just the French who developed the culture of this Enlightenment thought. Because in the area of philosophy, we have philosophical giants like Immanuel Kant and George Hegel, who would continue this Enlightenment culture, Enlightenment thought. So that's the end of this discussion. Okay, any question?
Doctor, may I ask?
Yes, yes, Father. Go ahead.
Um, with so much premium placed on reason in the Enlightenment period,
Yeah,
were they ignoring ultimate realities, which, yes, from the scholastic period and all, tried to ground it in reason in their own way,
yeah,
but also we have to be honest that it was also partly speculative, but nevertheless seemed to be very reasonable, reasonably open. uh, Matters such as ultimate end of reality, or an intelligent design that drives all of reality to an end. Because when the Enlightenment period speaks of the cosmos as mechanical, then as things are mechanically moving, aren't they driven towards some perfection? That sort of ultimate reality, ultimate questions, I don't see that being a source of focus in the period of the Enlightenment. Like they were not driving the answer towards that ultimate ends. They were just speaking for today and uh, to make sense of what's happening
yeah.
mechanically. So when there was so much premium placed on reason, were they actually ignoring vital questions such as these, matters of ultimate reality?
Yeah, you are right there, Father. The focus really of the Enlightenment is really the here and now. The
Mm,
here and now. I mean, develop human capacities, human progress here, progress of history here. Because if you're going to contrast the Enlightenment thinkers to the previous thinkers that we've been accustomed with, like for example the scholastics, or even the rationalists during the Renaissance, they were looking for something that is beyond this.
mm,
But majority of the Enlightenment thinkers, they just focus on the here and now.
mm,
Of course, not all of them, because if we look at Kant, Kant in his critique of practical reason, of course, if we study the critique of pure reason of Kant, he was just relying on this experience. That's why he said, well, there are many illusions of metaphysics. Okay, the illusions of God, the illusions of the ego, the illusion, these are transcendental illusions according to Kant. But Kant, he said, if we want to, because we want to be happy, and we cannot be happy here, happiness should be sought in the afterlife.
mm,
So, well, that's when I say that's the general uh, concern of the Enlightenment, that they are concerned with here and now. But it does not really apply to all of them, because there are, of course, some Enlightenment thinkers like Kant. Okay? But in general, especially the French Enlightenment thinkers, they focus on the here and now. That's why we can hardly see any reference to the ultimate reality, or to the reality beyond this world,
mm, mm,
beyond this life.
Since the idea of the enlightenment based on the history you showed to us a while ago, there was this kind of emancipation from dogma or from fideism, and they resort to reason alone as the source that would free us from those. And my question is all about reason, because it is one of the four pillars, and I am quite curious if they intend also to explain, or somewhat they intend to give us explanation about the beginning of reason. When does it begin, or what is the beginning of reason? Does it with nature, experience, or progress, or they are separate or independent from each other?
Reason is a basic human capacity. It's a basic human capacity. It's a capacity that is common to all, and it's a capacity that, you know, we have even as a child. Even as a child, everybody, when we were born, we have reason. It's the good sense. It's common to everybody. And but of course, we need to develop. We need to enhance reason, and that's why they said we have the way to develop reason, to enhance reason, is through education. And one example where education plays a very important role in the education of a child was developed by Rousseau in his work Emile. So in that book, he was actually uh, talking about how to educate a boy, Emile, from childhood. So that means that even as young, as children, we have the capacity, but we need to educate people so that we can enhance the rational the capacity. So if education is common, becomes available to all, then that would be human progress. So they put emphasis on education as a basis for human progress.
So following up from the
Yes, sir.
question of Brother
Yeah,
Albina, and your explanation was very good, sir. Because we are still studying in the context of religious background because of our faculty,
yeah,
all of us included there. Although this period of enlightenment sought to emancipate reason from faith, you know. We can see the trending that there was that swing from faith and reason to reason alone. And then now you say during the pandemic, we can see maybe there's a movement back to faith for a while.
yeah,
But somewhere inside the lecture, sir, you did mention logos. And that was a bridging
yeah,
between the ancient, the medieval, and even now. There's the theme of logos running in between, like an underpining quietly.
yeah.
Now, if we come out of that whole lens from a very macro perspective, how would you put it together, sir? Your thoughts on how do we use the capacity of logos, whether divine or human, in understanding between all these swings that there is something much bigger than what we are, and we're not seeing it yet.
Okay, that's a tall order, Father.
Yes, sir. It's just something playing in the mind, sir. That's
Yeah,
why I'm just throwing
actually,
it out.
yes. Actually, I've been thinking about that a lot because for me, if there's something that, as I've said, underpins everything, it's the logos. Okay, and the logos for me comes in many different forms. I understand that there is a logos in the outside, and there's also a logos inside, meaning in the mind. And I do believe that because of the logos of this that is manifested both in the external reality and the logos that is manifested in the internal reality in our mind, that we're able to understand all these things. Because if there's no commonality between the logica, the logos of the outside and logos inside, I don't know if we can understand reality. Okay, that's one thing. Now, and the question is, how do we understand these logos, especially the logos in the outside? For me, in the different periods in the history of human thought, there are many different interpretations of logos. The Greeks first articulated the logos, and they see this logos as as something that is not divine. Well, divine in their sense, but not divine in the way we understand what divine is. Okay, and of course, when you look at the early Christians, especially in the Gospel of John, the logos is the word. He identified the logos, the word, as Christ. So the logos becoming divine, becoming spiritual, becoming God. Or if the logos is God, he becomes man. Okay? And then when you look at the logos in the scholastic, the logos, of course, it follows the Christian tradition. And then when you go to the modern era, special enlightenment, the logos comes in again, but in a different form. Okay? In the form of mechanistic laws. So it's no longer the logos of the Christians, but the logos of science. Okay? But if there's something that remains the same, it's the logos of the human mind. But still, when you look at the logos of the human mind, it is always informed by how we understand the logos of the outside. So is this logos that is divine? And therefore, the believer in us, the reason, the logos of the believer, will always identify these logos as God. But if the logos of the human mind is a kind of logos that is secular, like for example, the logos of the alignment thinkers, then they will identify these logos of the outside as something that is mechanical, and vice versa. But if there's something that, you know, that for me as a believer tells me that this logo should be divine, is that no matter how we interpret these logos of the outside, like mechanical or the mechanical logos that the scientists discovered, the key word there is here is this: the mind is the logos of the mind is only trying to understand the logos that is outside. We're just trying to understand. No matter how great science is, it will only try to understand or discover what is this logos. So this logos, that is the external logos, is always something mysterious. It is a logos that we did not create. In fact, it could be the logos that created us, or the logos that created everything. So I always say science discovers, science uncovers, meaning there's already there that has been created. And who created this? It cannot be the scientist. It cannot be science. Because science is just uncovering. And every time we uncover, or every time we discover, and every time we invent something to discover more and more and more, the more that we are amazed by what we discover. So, let's say the astrophysicist discovers the extent of the universe. But they are just discovering. They're not creating. Meaning, there's already been there. Reality, the logos, no matter how you discover it or how you interpret it, it's there already for us to discover. So man cannot act like he is God simply because he knows. Because he's just knowing. He's just uncovering. He's not creating. He cannot even create himself. So there is already there. There is there. In that reality, that logos that is already there, is not our own making. And it remains mysterious. It remains mysterious. So, I don't know. So, even if we discover everything, still we just discovered. Of course, that's removing faith from the picture. We're just talking of logos here, not faith. Because no matter how advanced logos, the human logos, human understanding, stretch itself, the only thing it can do is to, I always liken this to, just like pulling the curtain. You pull the curtain so that you see something. Science is just, just opening the curtain, and science is amazed by what it discovers.
Thank you very much, sir. Very wonderful answer. Thank you.